Hello and welcome to Sci-Fi Scarborough Online 2. Today I'll be chatting with the guest I was personally most looking forward to meeting last year. Had everything gone to plan. He's the creator of some of the most iconic and decade-defining horror poster artworks of the 80s, including UK versions of The Evil Dead, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and The Evil Dead 2. His work is described as scarier than the film by Mark Gatiss and beautiful and transformative by Clive Barker. Graham Humphreys is an illustrator and designer working in the traditional medium of gouache with a vast portfolio spanning 40 years. Graham, how are you?
I'm good. Sitting on my vast portfolio of 40 years.
Ever expanding, I should imagine, as well.
Yeah, it's odd joining this last year or so. The pandemic hasn't dampened the work output at all. In fact, if anything, it's been probably the busiest year I've had. And I think, we had a little chat earlier on. I touched on the fact that I think, home entertainment hasn't really been affected. In fact, it's been needed more than ever. So in terms of Blu-ray packaging and anything related to anything you can buy on the internet, basically, that hasn't been affected by the pandemic. Group commissions seem to have continued apace, mostly from America, where groups of people get together and pick a film and pick an artist and then do a limited edition screen print. So I've been doing a number of those over the last year, and I've got a few lined up over the next year or so, actually. And they're all great titles, really good fun to work on, quite labor intensive, but it's all rewarding stuff. It's stuff that makes people happy and makes me happy doing it as well. And it's all good stuff to be working towards a new book to follow up the last one as well, to fill that with new images. I'm aiming for about 100 new pieces to be in there for next year. So all this new work will be, a lot of it's going to be pandemic work in a way. Maybe I can work that into the title somehow. I'm not too sure. But,
yeah, you'll have to come up with some sort of ingenious pun.
Yes, I can manage that, I'm sure.
As a child of the 80s, one of probably arguably the first piece of work of yours that I ever encountered was the forefront video VHS for Evil Dead 2. Now, when I was a kid, I was fascinated by this, far too young to see it, but it was one of those that was on my parents' video shelf in the living room, and I was fascinated by it for a couple of reasons. First of all, it says Evil Dead 2, and then it says Evil Dead 2 again on the cover. And also, I used to wonder, why is there this little ear here? And why is there this hand there? And it was later on that I worked out that they'd horribly cropped the picture, the poster, which was the quad format version, for the VHS cover.
My favourite joke from Carry On Screaming, he picks up the ear off the ground. He's talking to the chief superintendent about, so this ear, he says, what's that there? It's just sort of stupid little throwaway joke, but this ear, that there. So yeah, but you're right though, I think that the forefront cover came about because it was part of a package of films that were being put out under this budget label, which were probably from Palace Pictures after they'd gone into administration. So I think a lot of those titles that Palace Pictures owned then went on to a couple of other companies, and I think that's one of the titles. And actually, I remember designing that little logo, the forefront logo at the top as well.
Was that yours?
It is, shamefully, yeah.
Right.
I did a whole number of options on that logo, and that was the nastiest one which they went for.
Yeah. Well, it's a division of Polygram Video, is this?
That's right, yeah.
I remember seeing a lot of these that were very distinctive from having their gold sleeves.
I seem to remember that when Palace did go into administration, one of the very last films they put money into and had produced and were about to release was Dust Devil, Richard Stanley's film. And because they went into administration, literally the film wasn't going to get a release. So Polygram, I think, now you've mentioned Polygram, I think they took on a lot of Palace Pictures old titles, and they actually gave Dust Devil a very limited release because they suddenly were the owners of that property. And I do remember, I think we decided to go with that gold border just to kind of make it look a bit more glamorous, because, you know, we knew that basically they were shoving stuff out cheaply on that forefront label. So by putting gold on there, it kind of looked like it wasn't cheap.
Yeah, I don't think there's actually even, there isn't even a label on this video. I don't think it's ever had one. They're really cheap and cheerful.
Well, I think I probably designed that that cheap format about the same time as I started doing bits of work for Vipco, for Mike Lee, who just relaunched the Vipco label. I remember doing a number of covers for him, but I think we kind of pretty much did the same kind of thing. We just had that sort of very simple frame.
Yeah, I remember seeing quite a lot of those. I remember them being advertised on TV as well, the Vipco Vault of Horror. So you knew exactly where you were, you know, being led to with Vipco.
Up the garden path, yeah.
Yes. A lot of times I'm attracted to films based on their artwork and based on their designs and covers, especially limited editions and that sort of thing. Things like Death Waltz Records releasing, you know, soundtracks. If I see one that catches my eye, it actually encourages me to go out and find the film as well. You know, I'm seeing more things because of the, you know, the introduction through all these soundtrack labels, and then, you know, video releases from like Arrow and people like that as well. It actually inspires me to go and investigate these classic or cult and sometimes extremely obscure films. How did this all begin? I understand that you went to art college and you were studying graphic design. That's where you started out.
Yeah, that's true. That was in Salisbury, down in the West Country. Yeah, Salisbury College of Art had a pretty good reputation at that time. Had a very good graphic design course, and that was partly down to the dynamism of the two guys that were heading the course. And one of the things which made it quite good was that they had a very good policy of inviting guest lecturers from London who were, if not working in the industry per se, certainly were at the sort of forefront of, I guess, the kind of experimental work. Mostly they came from the Royal College of Art, and some of them had fine art training and were there really to instruct on illustration, which was obviously my speciality. You know, just at that time, 1976, 1977, sort of the year of punk rock, I suppose, and they're all influenced by everything that's happening and changing in London. And so, you know, it kind of felt very fresh. We had, you know, whereas the main lecturers at college were kind of very rooted in the previous era, which is when they were probably, you know, professional designers themselves before they went into teaching. Suddenly getting this influx of new exciting people kind of just really helped, you know, make it a very, very good period for me to study under. And so I feel very fortunate that, you know, that was the precise time that I was at art college. So, you know, it encouraged me to experiment a lot and find new ways of doing things which were not the traditional route, because everybody at art college in 1976, all the illustrators there just wanted to do airbrush illustration. You know, all wanted to do these very highly finished, you know, hyper real. I would think of artists like Roger Dean, for instance. You know, he was a big influence on people at the time, and, you know, myself, you know, I really loved his work, but I could also see that, you know, it was very much related to a particular era in terms of, you know, culture and music. And what I wanted to do was do something which was completely different to all of that. You know, there'd be a queue of people to use the very expensive airbrush that the studio had. I wasn't in that queue ever. I was too busy, you know, scratching away with stuff with a scalpel and, you know, trying to make things look rough. And my work was forged in that little period of time as a direct influence of those people coming from London to take us to the dark side as such.
You know, you mentioned Roger Dean. And artwork like that, particularly, you know, of airbrush style artwork, is often very clean and very stylish and very polished artwork. And I suppose, you know, that was reflective of the more sort of like the prog music, which a lot of these artists were designing work for the album covers and the tour posters and such like. And then I suppose along comes punk rock, and everything goes a little bit more back to basics. Everything's a little bit more rough and ready and a little bit more handmade.
I did 4 years at art college, and knowing that if I was going to work at all, I would have to move to London because, you know, in 1980, there was no internet. You couldn't communicate in any other way than using the telephone, you know, literally going to see people. So that it wasn't practical to live in the West Country and, you know, just call people all the time and then take trains up to have meetings and things like that. So I knew I had to move to London. So this is where I've been ever since. Although actually, of course, I could live anywhere now and be doing the same thing anyway. At that time, 1980, it was important to kind of be where the film industry was, and also the music industry was centered as well. A lot of publishers, book publishers and magazine publishers, they all had their offices, head offices in London. So I knew that if I wanted to get anywhere, doing anything, that's where I had to be. And so as soon as I moved up, I just started calling people, trying to get seen by any art director who would see me. I mean, in those days, you know, every company had an art director who would, their job was to commission people like me, illustrators and photographers. But, you know, commissioning illustration was a big thing in the early 80s. I think being an art director is a skill in itself, and it's kind of a skill that's been largely lost now. I mean, I know that, you know, if you go to a new company, publishing company, new Blu-ray companies even, you know, there's a struggle there for people to commission the work because it's the skill that isn't there anymore though. But anyway, in the 80s, you know, you'd call people and they'd know instantly how they could use you or if they couldn't use you, just because that was their job. So I saw a lot of people with my folio of work from college, and a lot of people weren't interested, and which is fair enough. It took a while, a good couple of years to start getting any kind of regular kind of work, and most of it wasn't film poster work or horror related at all. It was all kind of quite jobbing illustration stuff, magazine covers, book covers, even a little bit of top shelf illustration work. You know, Nave and Fiesta magazine were one of the first people to start using me. Of course, this is where people like Kim Newman, writers like Kim Newman, began their work as well, writing, you know, spoof pieces for those magazines. I was going to see the music press as well, Sounds, New Musical Express, with no joy at all. But I did have a bit of success with a couple of smaller independent record companies, and that kind of did lead to a bit of recognition in the music press, which did lead then to work for the NME, who were a regular client for a number of years. And but yes, the big break really was Palace Pictures and getting The Evil Dead. Something you just couldn't plan at all. It just happened quite organically. And again, actually, you know, Palace Pictures were a very new company. The guys running it at the time, that would be Steve Woolley, Paul Webster, a couple of the other people there, really had no idea about commissioning artwork at all. It was very much a sort of make it up as you go along. So kind of is the most slapdash job I've ever done, really, The Evil Dead, in many ways. But you know, we muddled through and produced a poster, and you know, we had a few hiccups with it. They felt the title wasn't jumping out enough, and so we repainted the title with using some red. It was always going to be like this kind of a misty kind of white yellow title, but we had to harden it up and then, you know, add in the red lettering as well. So we did that, but we got there in the end. Then we even went down to Wapping, which is where a lot of the newspapers had been, of course, originally. So there were a number of big print houses there, which would do all the film posters as well as print newspapers and magazines. And so we watched the Evil Dead poster come off the press, literally, with you to, you know, adjusting any colours as it came off. It's something that nobody would dream about doing now, but I think because for Palace Pictures, it was such a new thing for them, producing a film poster. And, you know, it was exciting for me as well, to be able to go down there and actually see how a film poster is printed. And, you know, it's fascinating stuff. So we watched the poster come off and we did a slight bit of colour adjustment simply to actually justify having taken a taxi down there. I think we just made it a bit more yellow than it was, and then sort of went away again. so very, very simple, very straightforward. But yeah, that was a very important job for me, and one that doesn't haunt me at all, but it just keeps coming back over and over again, and that's fine.
I think it's wonderful that certainly back in the 80s, you'd have different marketing campaigns for films depending, where you are in the world. I suppose for a little film like The Evil Dead, it predates this very strict marketing that would be global. Even Star Wars had several different posters, all designed by different artists, and that was just within the US market anyway. Nowadays you wouldn't dream of doing that. They'd all be the same globally. They just change the languages on the posters, really. I think it's fascinating that you've got the way that The Evil Dead was marketed in the US is quite different to how it looked in the UK because of your artwork and the really vivid, sort of garish, lurid greens, all these bright, vivid colours and stuff, which is quite a contrast to the more muted tones, I think, of the US versions, which are still quite striking in their own right. I think that the posters that you did, they're the ones that are probably the most iconic. I think certainly in terms of maybe the home video market as well.
There are two points to that anyway, is that, you're right that the difference in campaign was quite marked. And one of the reasons was that, of course, in the UK at that time, we had our own film poster format, the quad format, which is a sort of landscape format. And in the US, they always had the one sheet format, which is essentially, it's a kind of quad turned on its side.
Even the one sheets in the US, the one sheets here were different sizes up to a point.
Yeah,
it started being more standardized, I think, in the 80s. And often posters are kind of awkwardly rejigged around to allow them to be, to accommodate the format, which sometimes can look a bit strange. I really like a lot of quad posters. I've got a few myself in my collection. Sadly, none of yours. Wonderful variation in format, the quad. That's almost unique, I think, to the UK in some respects.
I think it was, yeah, because the US did have a lot of different formats. In Britain we had there would be things like front of house formats as well, and then there would be the above the entrance. You have the big long sort of formats as well. But the quad was the standard. So at that time, you'd often have to just do a new poster simply to accommodate the quad format, or you would adapt the American artwork to fill the quad format. But with Evil Dead, it wasn't just a question of the format; it was also a cultural need as well, because I think they identified that the look of the American poster, which was photographic, didn't seem to have much impact that they felt could be made here. What they were looking for, they identified quite correctly that it was very much a sort of hyper B movie, if you like. And if you look at the Evil Dead, you can see that Sam Raimi certainly had seen a lot of Hammer films. The color palettes will indicate that. Some of the filming techniques can indicate that as well, though. And a heavy dose of B movie nonsense in there as well. And so I think that Palace kind of thought that, given that Palace Pictures really came from their management came from the people that ran the Scala Cinema, that specialised in repertory cinema releases. They showed a lot of B movie stuff, anything from Teenagers from Outer Space. It came from outer space. All nighters of Dario Argento's films, all the John Waters films, all the stuff that was like subculture and transgressive. That's all the stuff they were showing at the Scala, and that was very much in their heads. And they saw The Evil Dead as being very much part of that heritage. And so what they wanted, I think, was something which kind of celebrated B movie trashiness in many ways, and it looks like I kind of fitted the bill really well.
Also in a very respectful manner as well. You can tell that the people who were putting these films out and distributing these films were really cared. It's very similar with regard to the likes of like Arrow Video now, who you work a lot with, who are releasing all sorts of weird and wonderful films on their various sub-labels. They want to present the film in the best possible way, and they're very exhaustive in terms of the extra features, and a lot of self-produced extra features as well that will go out and get interviews and stuff like that.
I think the Palace, in particular, it became a matter of pride for them that did pay attention to their film posters, and it became one of their selling points, in fact, that they would always highlight their poster campaigns as being exceptional and unusual. And again, that probably goes back to the Scala cinema, which celebrated all those amazing posters from the sort of 50s and 60s and 70s. And so I think there was definitely an appreciation of the artistry of posters there, which probably wouldn't be quite the same with a larger, more corporate company who basically would just be looking to get your main talent on the poster, looking as attractive as possible to bring in punters, and probably would not want to offend the public sensibilities at all. Also, you had to ensure that your posters were suitable for use on London transport, for instance, and various public sites as well. I think Palace were prepared to push that a little bit, see how far they could go sometimes. They weren't really worried about being corporate, simply because most of the releases in those early days in particular were not going to be big major films in any way. They weren't trying to compete with James Bond or Merchant Ivory products at all, though that wasn't what their marketing was all about. What they were doing was trying to celebrate the sort of the underbelly of cinema, if you like, re-exploring areas which had conceptually propelled some of the bigger budget films. If you look at all the big directors, they probably worked on sort of trashy stuff in the past, and they in turn have been influenced by stuff themselves, which probably might have been trashy stuff when they were young as well. So it's kind of literally looking at the underbelly and actually the heart of cinema, and that's what Palace, certainly in early days, were experimenting with. You can see that after Palace went down, Tartan Films, to a certain extent, started doing the same thing, looking at slightly transgressive material, which was still, very much at the heart of cinema. It's just, stripping away all the glossy stuff, because the majors could do that. As an independent distributor, you could actually get down and dirty in the sort of the real hardcore of what makes a film interesting. And that's usually the transgressive elements, which, it's kind of what made Palace unique and what made Tartan unique in their, at the peak of their time.
Earlier you mentioned art direction, and that Palace at first maybe didn't needed maybe a helping hand.
Yeah.
Would you say that you prefer to work with an art director? Is it beneficial to you to have a good understanding of what the client wants, especially working in traditional media? You don't want to get really far down the road and discover that you're heading in completely the wrong direction. That would be a total nightmare. I am aware of posters. I think there's a Return of the Jedi poster where the character of Lando Calrissian was originally painted quite small, but as it became more apparent that his role was going to be larger in the film, they wanted to change the poster to reflect that. And I think a different artist had to come in to then paint over or adapt the poster to make his head a bit bigger. And, would have caused all manner of problems, probably quite late in the day when these things were wanting to go to print. Yeah, is art direction something that you find useful? Or
in the early days, I would have done, particularly because I would have been a bit sort of less confident myself in the work I was doing. And so if you had anybody who could give you some sort of sense of direction, that was always going to be very helpful. Occasionally it'd be, a pain, but at the end of the day, you're trying to deliver work which answers a brief. All the work has to be commercial. I'm not doing it for my own, indulgence. It's all there for a reason. So you have to deliver something you think the client will be happy with at the end of the day. and something which, which will serve a function, which is selling their product. One hopes that the client has a good idea of their market, and that's the market they're aiming for. And so in commissioning you as the artist, they've already decided they're going in a particular direction anyway, though. So, that to that extent, you kind of know where you are. But jobs go horribly wrong when stuff gets badly art directed, and I've experienced that so many times in the past. It happens rarely now. Occasionally it does, but it's much rarer now. And I think, luckily, I'm probably at the point in my career where hopefully a client will trust my judgment. It's interesting when you can present your case and make people understand why you do what you do, then they're happy, because that's what they need to know. They need to know that you're confident in what you're doing, and you know what you're doing, and you're doing it for a reason. And I've been working on a soundtrack album cover. I painted the first panel, which is the front. I always paint the front first, because then they can begin their marketing if they need to do so up front, because they've got the basic product there. Then I painted the back cover, and they were confused because the color palettes were completely different. And they said, it looks like it could be two different products. You look at the front, look at the back, two completely different things. I had to explain that, well, there is a reason for that. If you look at the front, it's the exterior, an exterior scene. If you look at the back, it's an interior of that same place. And actually, what you see on the outside, what's going on the inside, two completely different things. And that's, part of the deception, in a way, that you'll lull into one kind of thing, turn it over, you're suddenly in another world. And that's related to the film. And actually, once I'd explained that, they said, perfect, we're sticking with it, that's absolutely fine. But there was that moment of hesitation on their part, where they were actually even thinking about, at this point, do we even consider using Photoshop to shift the color balance? And of course, that I would have done that if they'd wanted it, but I advised against it, and thus had to explain why I'd made those decisions, and they were happy.
What would you say the challenges with working with different formats? You're talking about, working with like gatefold album sleeves and things, but how do the different requirements, how do they present the different challenges, and how do you work around those? You mentioned in your book, for example, that the music industry was, the artwork was getting smaller as the development of cassette and CD came about. The artwork got reduced and reduced and reduced, and to the point where you've got digital download, which is it's lucky to have artwork at all.
True. It's not even music sometimes. It seems like.
Yeah.
But no, it did. That seems to have come back with a vengeance now. So yeah, vinyl, is a lovely format for artwork. It's almost designed really for artwork, and so yeah, the soundtrack stuff has been great, because they're like mini film posters in a way. For an illustrator, of course, you want to work with a format that actually, frames your work in a good way that people can enjoy it, and with in a substantial kind of way. Yeah, CDs were always going to be a bit tiny and inconsequential. Even video covers really were kind of mini film posters, and it's sort of when you were designing just for VHS or DVD and then Blu-ray, you're still designing for a small format, and it's just frustrating. You can pile in loads of stuff if you want to, but at the end of the day, your eye is only going to take in so much. Lots of detail isn't really necessary at all. What you need is good composition, good color sense, and something which you need some sort of large element there, which is there for the eye to settle on, and then details can be stuff that people can find afterwards. So, but there's a whole process you have to go through mentally with your particular formats, knowing how it's going to be perceived and seen. And of course, a lot of stuff which is bought online, people are going to see it on sites like Amazon, or even the distributor's own website, and you're going to get a tiny little postage stamp of an image, and that's really the first port of call for a lot of people when they're looking at a new product. So you have to be aware of all of these things. With the soundtrack stuff, I'm not so bothered, because I think that the products sell themselves to an extent.
Yes,
anyway.
I think that you're almost kind of preaching to the converted in a sense as well.
Absolutely.
Somebody buying a soundtrack is probably into the film already or knows it quite well.
But also somebody releasing a soundtrack anyway, they know that the artwork is going to be key to selling it. So even if it's not going to be racked up in shops, they're going to splash it all over the internet, and they will actually make sure that that image is seen. So they're going to be using social media in all of its might, if you like, to push the artwork and ensure that it's seen as fully as possible ahead of sales.
But sometimes that's not the case. With pre-orders, you don't necessarily have the luxury of being able to really see what you're going to receive. You're just going on just going with gut instinct on wanting to buy a limited edition soundtrack of something. And if you're lucky, you might get one of the first pressings in whatever color variation or something like that they'll have released. But it's not necessarily until you get it in your hands that you really appreciate the extent of the work that's gone into it. And there's something, I think, that is, contrastingly different about an artwork that you can interact with, as opposed to an artwork that has to catch your eye as you're walking down the street, or if you might pass it in a car or the bus, or you might see it on a train or something. And that's got to do a job in a split second. Whereas, of course, if you've got an artwork that's more explorative in its presentation, the way that you work with a gatefold vinyl, and then the inserts and everything else that goes with it, that's something that you're going to look at and enjoy over a long period of time. And it was very similar when I was a kid, looking at video covers and stuff. It was the sort of thing that I would pore over as a child, and be really fascinated by. And so sometimes in that respect, I think that detail can be really, really good.
Of course, therein is an issue that you've got a lot more time to explore the artwork than I will have had to actually paint it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I'm kind of stuck trying to deliver something which is going to have some sort of longevity and be an attractive item, for years to come. And yet I've got a couple of weeks to deliver it in with a budget as well. So it's always a struggle trying to deliver something that you're happy with and that that the customer will be happy with, and also being realistic about what can be achieved in a certain amount of time and with a certain budget as well, though. So yeah, I find that sometimes I'm spending longer on something than is probably wiser financially for me. I mean, it's great for the client and great for the customer, of course, if I'm losing money by spending more time on something. But certain things I think do merit the attention, and you can't help but sometimes find that certain jobs are jobs that you really enjoy doing and you're very attracted to. You can't always choose your own work, but certain jobs will actually become something you're really attached to, and you will make the extra effort on those jobs because you want it partly for your own satisfaction to deliver something very special, but also knowing that will be appreciated by the customer as well as the client. I mean, really, it's all about the customer rather than the client. You want the client to be happy because they're paying you, but the customer, at the end of the day, is buying. And if the customer is buying in quantity, then obviously the client's happy and they're more likely to come back to you. So I had to keep that in mind as well. Sometimes the work you do is not about that one job. It's also about the subsequent work that will arise from that particular job as well.
What would you say your key influences are? Are there specific designers or artists or musicians or?
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, for somebody like me, and I think for a lot of creative people, you tend to be magpies that you pick from different sources.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Rather than a particular artist, I would look at a particular piece of work from that particular artist, and then pick and choose, from other artists as well. So there's no definite kind of little book of favorites at all. I can't say that a particular artist has been a bigger influence than any other. It's more likely a piece of work they've done has been a bigger influence than, say, a piece of work by somebody else. But it's all kind of just stuff you just pick up as you go along. So, you know, musically as well, yes, of course, there have been significant bands that have really influenced heavily the work I do, and you know, those I will then quite happily some bands like the Cramps, the Gun Club, but kind of similar kind of era and style of music. The Damned, I guess, you know, Season of Banshees, just because of the visual materials. And those are all bands that I sort of listened to when I was at art college and in those very early years in the 80s. And so they're your formative years anyway, and those are going to stay with you. And I still listen to them now when I'm working, because it kind of allows me to kind of relive the period in which everything was quite fresh still, if you like. And when I was experimenting more. So I think it's important that you do kind of experiment a little bit with your work. And I do, you know, over the years, there are shifts in my work that I recognize as well. So if I look at something I did a year ago, I know that I would do that differently now. And so, you know, as you're going on, each job has a slightly different approach. You know, it's got kind of a slow process, but it does, I know it when I see work I did, you know, revisiting jobs, for instance, you know, something I did 5 years ago, I may be working on something, the same film in a different way. It might be a soundtrack or a new release with a different client. And, you know, you approach that job in a completely different way, simply because you do what you do now as opposed to what you did then. But, you know, you still want to be excited about the work you do. And if that means you're going back to source inspirations, you know, then that's what I do. Today, I've been listening to music that was made about 40 years ago. But in order to help me work on something, a film that might have been made 60 years ago, but trying to make it look contemporary. I mean, that's always the key, is to take influences and then make it you know, into something new. You know, it's a form of alchemy, if you like. So you're taking the base metals and then trying to turn them into gold, although not the forefront label, of course.
Yeah,
yeah, you see,
not quite.
yeah.
So I suppose in your formative years, when maybe in your childhood, you're probably immersed in the worlds of like the various kind of horror magazines and that sort of thing. Were you influenced by artists like Basil Gogos, who did a lot of famous monster magazines and that sort of thing? As you were saying before, we chatted earlier about, you know, there was a period where all these classic horror films and stuff were being shown quite regularly on TV. I suppose for a child growing up with stuff, it must have been, you know, a key influence. I think I read in your book, Hung, Drawn and Executed, which I purchased last year from your website with a discount code, which was very cool. You mentioned the Aurora model kits, which were a key influence.
And you can see, I think there's a one or two reproduced there. You can see the colours were a big influence on what I do. But no, you're right. I mean, you see a lot of these influences weren't always there when I was a kid. Some of them came later because, you know, you had limited access to a lot of material. I mean, you know, as I said before, you know, there was no internet, and you know, it's really kind of what was available in the shops where you lived at the time. You just didn't have access to stuff unless it was perhaps reviewed in magazines or whatever. So a lot of the stuff you just couldn't see. So, for instance, famous monsters of filmland, it didn't exist in my universe at that time, simply because you couldn't see it. It wasn't in the shops. Had no idea it existed at all. Those Aurora monster kits appeared at a certain time. They'd already been out for some period of time in America, and perhaps in some places in Britain as well. But it was all about what was available for me where I lived at that particular time. So I think by the time the Aurora monster kits were on the shelves for me to see, they already were being kind of repackaged in a way with the sort of the glow in the dark novelty, which wasn't there in the original packaging at all. So I came into those a bit late. However, it was that repackaging which I found attractive, and actually looking back at the original box art, somehow it's kind of missing that element. And so, you know, I'm influenced by something that's already been changed, if you like. And it's kind of just interesting how that kind of chain reaction works, you know. And I've always been fascinated by the idea that, you know, whoever you're influenced by has themselves been influenced themselves. So, for instance, with film poster work, I myself have been greatly influenced by the work of Drew Struzan, for instance. I remember seeing his posters when I was a teenager. He did some of the Star Wars posters, of course, and then went on to do Raiders of the Lost Ark, all those artworks, and the range of work is incredible, and it's really highly accomplished, beautiful illustration work, and it definitely had a big influence on what I do. And you can see his influence in the work of people like Paul Shipper as well, who has been doing some amazing artwork, and many others. So although that artist is a touchstone for many people like myself, of course his touchstone is from an earlier period. And the big influence on Drew Struzan was a gentleman called J.C. Leyendecker, who's a contemporary of Norman Rockwell. And so most people wouldn't know who J.C. Leyendecker was, but they would, a lot of people would probably know who Norman Rockwell is. So that they were contemporaries, but a very different kind of style of work. And then Leyendecker himself was influenced by people like Alphonse Mucha, who was a sort of best known for a number of Art Nouveau pieces, which regained popularity in the 70s. And Alphonse Mucha was influenced by people like some of the French artists like Toulouse-Lautrec, for instance. So there's kind of this interesting lineage. You can just trace it going back. So if anybody likes my work and might feel compelled to, emulate some of it, or not emulating me, they're emulating me being emulating Drew Struzan, who's emulating Leyendecker, etc., etc. So it's an interesting lineage. Again, means that when you're influenced by somebody, you're not necessarily influenced by them. You're influenced by their influences, if you like.
Oh, of course, yeah. That's how I like to approach things as well. When I get into a band, for example, I like to know what inspired them. That's the way that I kind of find my way around and find the different types of music that I like. If I like this particular, and the same with films as well. If I watch a film, I want to know who made it and what they did before and who they were influenced by, and then it sort of spreads out from there to this sort of like wide web of stuff, and suddenly I end up, I don't know, somewhere. I don't know quite how I got there. Staying on the topic of technique and influence and things, you're really kind of open about your technique and your processes. And I think that's quite unusual sometimes to see that in an artist. Some artists can be quite secretive about the way that they produce their work, but there's a nice kind of like step-by-step guide on how to rip off Graham Humphreys.
You've got all the cheating that goes on, and that's not a problem at all, because when I was at art college, tracing stuff was considered, it just wasn't something I'd even considered doing. And yet it's kind of what every illustrator was doing. And remember at some point, it must have been probably around the time I was doing Nightmare on Elm Street, there was another designer just saying, like, what on earth are you doing? Why are you doing this freehand? Why don't you just, there used to be these devices you used to get called, you'd have to have been around at the time really to understand what they were, but essentially they were mechanical tracing devices, if you like. They called, they're always called a Grant Enlarger. I don't know whether that was the manufacturer's name or not, I don't know. But basically they were like booths almost, where you stick your head in, put a back cloth over you to block out all the light. And it's basically a glass plate, which you have your tracing paper on. And underneath was a platform which was lit up by bright lamps. And you had two handles, one for focusing, one for making stuff bigger or smaller. So you had the two handles you crank until you had your image the right size you wanted on the tracing paper projected, and then you just literally would trace that projected image. But before people were using those, they were projecting onto walls. I've even done it myself. You have a slide in a projector, you project it on a wall, and you would trace the outline. And a lot of artists worked like that. And it's not cheating, it's just manners of being accurate with your dimensions and perspectives.
It would give you a good indicator of how to kind of construct and compose your overall image, especially when you need to send something to a client where you can't go all out and do a fully completed piece of work, then send it, then find out that it's all completely wrong. It's a good way to kind of get a rough composition of everything, sketch it out.
It's your reference, and photographic reference is so crucial with illustration work. And it doesn't happen now, but what used to happen is that illustrators would hire in a model with costumes, and you would photograph, with lighting and everything. And because quite often illustrators would work in sort of studios where there'd be a number of them, they would be able to pull their money together and make this happen. I mean, for an individual nowadays, you don't have a photographic studio. You can't just hire a model with a costume in order to do a Blu-ray cover, because your budget has gone the moment you've even started even thinking about it. So the ways of working are very different now. I mean, I was talking about Drew Struzan earlier on. Now all his work would require really good reference material, and he could organize photo shoots with the talents, like Harrison Ford, for instance, for the Raiders of the Lost Ark posters. He could organize a photo shoot with that actor in the costume, or he would certainly have the photographs of the actor, but then he could hire a costume and have that lit, and then get a model to be photographed. I mean, all these, all that amazing illustration you see is so reliant on really good reference material, and the better the reference material is, then the better the illustration work. All these pulp book covers you used to see, the artwork's fantastic. The books may be terrible, but the artwork's beautiful, and it's because they've got great reference. They get in models, photograph them, and that you just got the best possible material to work with. All the lighting is there for you. It's all been prepared, or you've chosen it yourself. And all of that is absolutely essential. So for me, the best work I do is when I have the best possible reference material. Quite often when you're working from a sort of a really bad quality film before it's been restored, an old release, then you're working with blurry images, and it just makes it so much harder to do the job. One of the cheats you can do, of course, is add in new elements, which you can then make quite sharp and in focus by photographing your own hand, for instance. There are cheats you can do which can help dress something in a way which kind of makes it less difficult, shall we say, as an image. If I had the money to be able to hire models and get great photography, and my work would be so much better, I feel. So you kind of you're always limited by what's available. I mean, it's just simply making stuff up just isn't really possible. If you do, then it shows. You can't get those nuances.
Sometimes restrictions can be great in a sense. It'll allow you to be a bit more expressionistic because you don't have the reference material to hand. There wouldn't have been, perhaps, like on-set photographers working on these films that would be able to provide you with great images. Even, the likes of Drew Struzan, who you mentioned. I think I remember hearing a story from him where he basically got his family together to kind of roughly pose to get his composition and stuff right. And he was working on an enormous budget film. He'll have had the likenesses for the actors and stuff, but in terms of composition, he just arranged people that he knew or his family to sort of roughly plan things out. And it's a process that people have been doing for a long time like that. I know that comic books were made in a very similar way, with people kind of posing. I'm sure I've seen pictures from something like Dan Dare or something like that, and it's almost like they've got goldfish balls on their head. Even Disney was kind of guilty of they were rotoscoping, which is a form of copying movement in an illustrative way based on film footage, and then they would recycle the work. So you'd see like something elaborate, like maybe a dance movement or something like that, might be reproduced in multiple films, but it began its life as a short piece of film footage. But absolutely essential in having that point of reference for an animator. Is animation something you've ever dabbled in?
I think I've been asked twice, and I've always just said that I wouldn't be interested. I mean, it's just it's time consuming, and it's just nobody's going to pay you enough money to do that unless they've got big budget, and I don't have independent wealth to be able to actually not work and actually do that indulgent thing. So So no, perhaps if an earlier stage I'd taken that direction, things might be different. But it wasn't something I had an interest. I mean, I love animation, but I've no interest in actually creating it myself. Though, I mean, for me, my challenge has always been just to, have your piece of paper, 2 dimensions, and actually have everything on that one image. Trying to encapsulate a film in one single image has always been what I'm interested in, as opposed to multiple images. Same with comic books as well. I've never been interested in doing comics either, for the same reason.
So it's nice to see that you still have your foot firmly planted in the world of independent cinema. I'm curious to know how you got involved with film, which I've also got on VHS here, which is Yellow from, I think it was 2012 this came out.
Yeah.
It's only a half an hour film. I got the DVD as well, but there was a super limited edition VHS, which I couldn't resist, in big box rental format. It's a half an hour film. You did the poster, which was then adapted for the DVD cover, the VHS cover. There was a soundtrack single, effectively. It was a 12-inch single, which I've got somewhere as well. I'm just wondering how you got involved in that.
I got an email from the director. As simple as
As simple as that.
I think he'd seen, I think perhaps it was the poster for Creepers, might have been his reference point there. He'd obviously seen a number of pieces of work and thought that I'd be the right person for the job. I can tell you the female character there is the receptionist at the office where I have my studio space. She's appeared in a few pieces. She's on I did a cover for Goblin for Death Waltz. It was like 4 re-recorded pieces. That's her with the knife and the pins in her eyes. Same lady.
I think I read in the book that you sometimes, there was a poster for, it was kind of like a what if poster for Ray Harryhausen's War of the Worlds.
Oh yeah.
And I think you'd used Beatles, pictures of Beatles fans.
That's right,
as reference for screaming people in the corner of the artwork, which was quite effective.
Yeah, it's a bit of pop culture reference, I think.
Yeah.
And it's almost giving it some sort of B movie aesthetic, which I think that it's probably wrong to say that a lot of Ray's films had that kind of B movie feel. They didn't at all. They're quite beautifully made. I don't think I wasn't trying to do him disservice at all. It's just that I think it was just a kind of fun thing to do with that poster, because I was also working directly from Ray Harryhausen's original drawings, as he conceived certain scenes in the film. And in fact, one of the drawings that really attracted me was literally his visualization of Martians attacking an airship, and clearly his reference for that was the Hindenburg. And so that's what I used on that poster as well, because I always think about airships. I love airships, and I love the film The Hindenburg, made in the 70s. And so it was an excuse to get an airship in there more than anything else. And I think the screaming pop fans were just kind of part of that. I talked about being a magpie before, and really that poster is very much about that. It's kind of just taking different things in the same way that Ray Harryhausen did to an extent as well, and just having fun with them. So it was, trying to create something which, had a kind of, let's say, a rock and roll element. And that's kind of going back to the poster I did for The Evil Dead, which, was essentially a sort of punk rock poster. And in fact, in order to embody that spirit, it was my idea that I would hand letter, hand paint all the credits, all the lettering on there was hand done, because I didn't want anything mechanical or controlled, shall we say. That was the whole ethos of this kind of handmade punk rock kind of thing. In fact, I even wanted to hand draw the little Palace logo, and then I realised it was a complex little logo, and I thought, well, it's probably more work than it's worth. So I think I photocopied it just to grunge it up a little bit, and just use that on the artwork.
As you say, for both your Evil Dead posters, the type is very much integrated into the artwork. Whereas A Nightmare on Elm Street, you can tell that you've obviously allowed space for type provided by the distributor or the producers? Or
yeah, it was a lesson I learned fairly early on, probably after those Evil Dead posters, was that if you integrate the title as part of the artwork, actually paint the title in, if the poster or VHS cover or whatever goes to a different territory, foreign, where a foreign title is going to be needed, then they're going to have to cover that over somehow. It just doesn't work. So I learned at that point that you don't integrate the title into the painting at all. So I stopped doing that. I will hand letter often the titles, but then they're especially in, now we have Photoshop, they could be on a separate layer and can be removed easily. When we did Nightmare on Elm Street, that again would have been a sort of mechanical piece of artwork on a layer which you sent off to the printer. It was never integrated into the artwork at all, but it also meant that it could change as well, though, because clients can change their minds sometimes. And I've worked on things where the title will suddenly change at the last minute. You just couldn't paint that title onto the artwork without having to repaint it.
It's far too risky. Would you have any advice for aspiring artists or designers that are hoping to get into similar industries?
Yeah, go into finance. It's hard. I know that I've been asked to give advice to students. I don't know what I can say really, because the way I entered the industry myself isn't possible now. It just doesn't work like that anymore. If you want to earn lots of money, then doing what I do isn't the way to do it. And if I earn a living now, I'm very lucky to be able to do so. It's simply because I've been doing it such a long time, and I'm sort of 60, going to be 61 soon, and I'm still not a rich man, and I never will be. But it's if you want to make money, then there are places for illustrators, and those tend to be in the gaming industry. That's where a lot of money is, and also in the visualization industry as well, for film as well. So and I know that people enter into colleges and universities specifically to go into those areas, and that's great. And there's a lot of incredible talent which is focused in that direction. Otherwise, my advice would be that you do what you want to do. If you can make a living out of it, that's great. For instance, I do have an agent still who I don't really get to do much work with anymore, simply because that's the nature of the industry now. Whereas in the 80s, even the 90s, you could, an agent could take on an illustrator and pretty much guarantee them a sort of basic income. They wouldn't get rich, but they could, they would turn over money. But even about 10 years ago, my agent was saying that he wouldn't be able to take on anybody unless he knew they had an income coming in from elsewhere, because he simply couldn't guarantee them a living wage at all, though, which you could have done in the decade before.
Yeah.
So if you want to be, if you want to work as an illustrator, you have to be prepared to understand that you're not going to be making a lot of money, at least initially, unless you're very lucky. You get involved with a company where you've got some sort of a guaranteed income. It is, it's just not easy. I think it was for a period of 1 year. I had I had so little money, although I had work. I took on a teaching job. Opportunity came up. Somebody was going away for a year sabbatical, and the opportunity came up to do some part-time teaching, which I did because I just desperately needed the money. If I was being pure about what I wanted to do, I would have just lived in poverty for that year. It sort of saved me at a particularly difficult time, but that's what you have to do. So the other thing is, of course, that throughout my career, I've always worked on things which are not genre. Up until about 8 years ago, I was still doing work in other areas, because simply, you take on the work where it comes. You can't pick and choose your jobs. I couldn't have started off way back in 1980 saying, well, I only want to do horror film posters and I only want to do punk rock album covers, because that just was never going to happen at all. Even when I was doing the Evil Dead and Nightmare on Elm Street posters, I still wasn't just doing horror film stuff. I was doing a lot of other stuff which you will never see, partly because it's just I don't have examples of it now. The illustrations have long since gone, being thrown away or delivered to the client, and then never saw them again. So there's a whole body of work out there which was mine, which just doesn't exist anymore. but that's the work which allowed me to have a living. Everybody finds their way eventually, but I can't really give solid advice other than, you follow your own path as best you can. All the clients I've found over the years, all those lucky jobs like the Evil Dead, Nightmare on Elm Street, it's all just complete luck, being in the right place at the right time. You just follow what you do, try to excel at what you do, make the job the best job you can do at the time with the materials you have. Hope that enough people will see the work that will just grow from that point. Yeah, I'm afraid I can't really offer you much more than that.
Is there anything that you're working on at the moment? Anything exciting? When we chatted earlier, you mentioned this 80s documentary that you were working on. Is there anything you can reveal about that?
Well, I did I was approached last year. In fact, interestingly, it was the very last event that I went to before the pandemic ended live stuff. I'd been up to the Scarborough Festival in Manchester. Getting a train back to London, I had a phone call from, I'd done a piece of work with them before. But anyway, they asked if I'd be interested in doing a piece of artwork for their second documentary, the first having been 80s horror. So this was 80s science fiction. I think initially they weren't going to approach me at all because obviously they'd identified that science fiction and horror, completely different genres. Well, I don't think they are really, but I think they do cross over quite a lot. I think, the client thought that actually I would be okay for the job. So it's kind of reward level piece of artwork, be a poster, which is a mashup of lots of great kind of 80s science fiction films, which all pretty much have horror elements anyway. Though, I mean, if you look at Aliens, for instance, it's very much a horror film, I'd say. RoboCop is very much a horror film, I'd argue, and as is Terminator in many ways. So a lot of these classic, science fiction films of the 1980s are actually also horror films in many ways. And the client identified that as being the case, and so thought that probably, yes, I would be the right person for the job. So that was a massive job, probably the most complex piece I've ever done. I'm pretty proud of it. The documentary's still being made, I believe. So as a reward level, that poster isn't yet available at all. So I can't sell prints of it. But other than that, I do have a list of work I'm trying to get to grips with. All good stuff as well, some private poster commissions again. I've got work that I've done which nobody's seen yet because it's confidential until the moment it's public. So there's at least half a dozen jobs out there. I've got work up until July for definite, so I'm not taking on other work at the moment, which will be needed before June. I can tell you there's some, a few crowd pleasers in the works coming up. Some Blu-ray covers, quite happy with. I think they're scheduled for September maybe, so I can't share those at the moment, although the artworks are ready and have been ready since December. There's some good fun stuff out there anyway. I can guarantee you'll like some of the stuff I do, if not all of it.
I'm sure I'll recognise it before I've, straight away when I see the artwork revealed. When Arrow Video, whoever it is, might post something, I'm like, that's the Graham Humphreys, that is. I think we should probably try and round this up because I was getting blinded by the sunlight earlier, and now I'm disappearing into
the moonlight.
Yeah. I've got a handful of questions, and so I'll try and pick out stuff that we haven't covered. Dan Doty, who really likes the work you did for Andrew Lyles, would like to know about your colour palette because it's very unusual. Lots of green. Interested to know what your inspiration is for that.
It's probably being antagonistic, actually, because I remember being told over and over that green doesn't work on film posters, and I've always actually used as much green as possible ever since I was told that, just to prove otherwise. But I like using combinations which are unnatural, if you like. I like contrasting colours, and I like colours which are I don't know. They kind of. I think it's you try to evoke a feel with things sometimes, and that if you use certain colours that will evoke certain emotions, and also be slightly repulsive sometimes. And also, I like to play with colours that shouldn't go together. And you always told things like, I remember it was a tradition that blue and green should never be seen. So I always like to use blue and green as well. So anything basically I'm told that shouldn't work, that's what I'll do. Because
using, these really bright, vivid colours, and as you say, the combinations that you wouldn't normally go anywhere near gives you a distinctive, unique quality. Graham Rhodes, who worked in graphic design back in the 70s, worked with a lot of punk bands. He says, was the 3D idea for the Cramps Off the Bone album the band's or yours?
It was mine. Well, the band weren't involved with that album at all, because what had happened was, if anybody doesn't know who the Cramps are, the fact is the band had released 2 albums through Mars Copeland's label, IRS Records, or over here they were called Illegal Records, and they had a big falling out, blazing row. The Cramps absolutely loathed him, and anyway, there was some sort of litigation which meant that the Cramps couldn't record anything in a studio and release a new album. And so the way the band got around that, they released an album called The Smell of Female, which was a live album. So they had new songs, but rather than have them recorded in the studio, they were recorded as a live performance, which actually got around the legality of them not being able to record new material. So whilst that was going on, Miles decided that he was going to just, capitalize on what he had, which was the 2 albums and the B-sides of singles, and release sort of a greatest hits compilation, which the band, couldn't prevent because he had the rights to those tracks. They couldn't stop him from doing that. So anyway, it was presented to me, and because I love the Cramps, and so it was a chance to work on, if not work with them, certainly a Cramps product. And I think it came about because, in fact, it's kind of it relates to the Evil Dead in some ways, because I've become quite good friends with Stephen Woolley, who was heading up Palace Pictures at the time, and he'd been to Germany, I think, to some film festival, and picked up this book, which was about 3D in cinema and comics. It was all in German. But it had a lot of illustrations in there showing how the technique worked for comics and such like. And then shortly after that, because that was in my head suddenly, I really wanted to do some 3D work. Then another book came out called Amazing 3D, which again, I think it was an American publication, again examining, the 3D kind of genre in film, but in particular in comics. So, and again, it gave you the process, how you could achieve the 3D look in 2 dimensions. So with that kind of secret revealed, and then this job coming up, I thought, well, what better way to represent the Cramps and, this kind of B-movie idea. I think the Scala Cinema had recently shown a 3D season of old black and white classics. We had the red and green glasses. And I remember it came from outer space and Creature from the Black Lagoon, all these kind of B-movie films. And so that's where the idea of the 3D cover came about. So I presented that idea to IRS Records and they loved it. And I said, it will mean there's the extra expense of the glasses, which have to come with the LP, and also the inks that you print with have to be matched to the lenses as well for it to work. So they managed to source a company that I think had probably worked in 3D comics. And so it's really just down to me to kind of try to make that work. And it was a hit or miss thing because there was no way to know if it was going to work until the point it was printed. And I kind of hoped really at that point that, and I knew that, it worked to a certain extent, but I couldn't really judge how well. And if at the end of the day it didn't work at all, then it would create the illusion of a 3D cover, if you like. So I would cover myself by, saying, well, it's and trying to emulate how something would look in 3D. It sort of worked okay. I think now I could probably do the same thing, but with the use of Photoshop, actually, mock it up on screen and actually control everything, whereas I had no control over at all at the time. And the title, Off the Bone, I was trying to think of it. Well, they hadn't a name for it at all, and I, after getting the commission, had been out with some friends to an Indian restaurant, and you know, they had a number of things which just listed as off the bone, you know, chicken off the bone, lamb off the bone. And I just thought, what a great idea for an album cover, because you know, these were tracks literally cut from albums, so they were literally off the bone. So that's how that came about as well. So it's one of those weird things where I actually came up with the title as well. And actually, you know, quite often when I was working on VHS covers, or even some of the film poster work, you know, I'd come up with the taglines, you know, because I was always interested in taglines on posters anyway.
Oh, and, so right, yeah.
So quite often, you know, some of those taglines would be mine. You know, not a professional copywriter or anything, though, just the humble artist.
When I was at uni, I did a series of poster designs which were based purely on the taglines, and the tagline was the central part of the design, with the actual movie title really small in the corner, because in some regards those taglines are just as iconic as the films. Oh
yeah, no, I quite agree. Now, I you know, when you're doing a film poster, you are aware that, you know, although you'll have the image, the tagline will help kind of communicate the subject matter, or even confuse, if you like, or add a level of mystery. It's always another visual, if you like, because a tagline will create visuals in your head, and so it's like another element you add to a poster to kind of to dress it further. I mean, you can see the ones behind me. You know, it's you know, the taglines very much add to what's going on.
Graham Rhodes also adds, by the way, I worked for Miles Copeland and did the British single sleeve for Goo Goo Muck and the Garbage Man. And it was their first ever UK gig at the venue. And did you ever meet Lux Interior? And if so, did he do his eye trick at you?
I only met him once, and that's the whole band actually. And that's literally at a signing at Virgin Records. They were signing copies of Psychedelic Jungle. So I was just a punter lined up there with my LP, getting it signed with everybody else. So there was no specific communication really, other than hello, goodbye. And that was it really. So no, I've never really met them as such, unfortunately. He must have known Vermilion Sands, I'm guessing. Yes. Then if he did the covers. Right, okay. Well, Vermilion was my contact at IRS Records. She was the first person I saw there.
You probably crossed paths at some point.
Sorry?
You've probably crossed paths at some point.
Well, it was a very small company, and people would just be hanging out in there all the time. And Vermilion was great. She was very supportive of my work, and we became very, very close friends, and would go get horribly drunk together quite often. She was very much sort of, she wasn't really a trained artist herself, but she sort of found herself doing, well, art directing. She art directed the Cramps video for Garbage Man, for instance. But yeah, she kind of really controlled all the visual output of IRS Records for a period of time. And I don't think she liked Miles Copeland at all, but you know, it was a job. And I think that she enjoyed working with the musicians. You know, she'd been a musician herself. And you know, she got me involved with Lords of the New Church, for instance. So I think she'd shown Steve Bater's a piece of work I did for the NME, and you know, he liked it, and that's how I got involved with them. But again, that was just Vermilion Sands. You know, quite a character. You probably wouldn't see people like that working at a record company nowadays.
No, I've heard all sorts of crazy stories from Graham about you know, the antics they used to get up to back then.
And I can imagine. Well, actually, I can tell you a slightly slightly amusing story with Vermilion Sands. I mean, literally, the first meeting I had with her, it's back in the day when I'd be taking a folio around, you know, to any number of people on any given day. So, you know, often if you went to see somebody, you would have already seen somebody else, if not 2 or 3 people that day. I had gone up to Kilburn to see a potential client there, who was actually a friend of a friend who just started this new job, art directing, being the art director for a couple of dodgy publications, Nave and Fiesta magazine. And so I ended up doing some work with them. But anyway, he ended up being the art director of the NME ultimately. So that's how I ended up working with the NME. But anyway, I'd been up to Kilburn and had this meeting with this guy, and he said, okay, well, as an example of how we've used illustrations in the magazines before, take a few copies. So I had I had about half a dozen copies of Nave and Fiesta magazines I tucked into the portfolio, and marched off down to Ladbroke Grove to meet Vermilion Sands. And so I wasn't even thinking about what I had in the folio. I was just thinking about, okay, new client, potential new client. So it was all about talking, really. And then she just said, well, let's have a look at the work. So I opened up the folio, and of course, out slid copies of Nave and Fiesta onto her desk, which is funny. And anyway, she said, oh, that's a surprise. I said, well, I tried to explain how come I had a whole load of soft, called porn magazines in my portfolio. Anyway, she spent half an hour looking through them, having a laugh, and then we talked about my work.
John Eric Lamb of Black Sheep Cosplay, do you have a traditional drink or snack to get you into the creative zone before you take on a project?
No. No, that would be a very bad idea. No, I like drinking red wine, but I'll do that after I've done the work, though. Getting ideas, concepts. A lot of ideas come just as I'm about to fall asleep or just as I'm waking up. It's in that half kind of dreamlike state, and for some reason, all the best stuff I do seems to come at those little moments. So I'm sort of half awake usually, but an idea will suddenly come. And it's probably because, your brain's relaxed, you're not actually struggling to try and think of an idea, but you've got all the elements in your head and things just naturally happen like that. And there's so many jobs which are literally kind of this dreamt image. And the challenge for me is then to kind of recreate what I've dreamt with all the sort of sensations that were in the dream moment as well. And imbue the illustration with what that sort of weird otherworldness. I mean, I don't think alcohol would do the same thing really. I'd probably just fall asleep. But yeah. So there's nothing that particularly I rely on the material in the film or the music, and just allow it to play around in my head. So there isn't any other stimulus other than the actual item itself. Sometimes I'll be the film, if it's a film, it might remind me of something, and I'll go to another source, which might be some sort of historical context, or it might remind me of something I'd read in the news. There's always, little places you can go outside of the actual product itself for extra inspiration, and I do that quite a lot. So, but it's not related to food or drink, though. It's usually just me making little connections in my head. And sometimes music will help prod me in a direction as well. If a particular project reminds me of a particular band's music, I might listen to that band and then allow lyrics or the music from that band just to take me somewhere else as well, and then bring in those new elements. Sadly, there's no snack or drink I can recommend. That's for the creative process.
Lee Hare says, what would your dream commission be?
Well, there probably isn't one really. I've worked on so many great projects that that I think probably all those dreams have already been realised in many ways. What's interesting about the way the career has gone is that you can't anticipate anything at all. Everything comes as a surprise in a way, and I quite like it like that. So there's no point in me trying to think, what if, because actually what tends to happen is those jobs do happen naturally anyway, though at some point. If I think of something now, it's very possible that job might actually land on my lap in a year's time. I don't have the time really to do stuff outside of the commercial work, because I'm lucky enough to be busy pretty much all the time. The one exception literally I can think of in the last probably 20 years was when I reimagined the Cramps cover off the bone as a full colour illustration, simply because there was some delay in a response from a client, which meant that I couldn't start the job for at least 2 or 3 days. So literally that gave me a little window of opportunity to try and do something which would give me pleasure, but also hopefully give some other people pleasure as well. Recreating that cover was a great thing to do because it just meant I could go back to doing the same job, same elements, but actually just using the skills I've developed over the intervening years, and imagine it as a full colour piece. I managed to sell quite a few prints of those. So, although it wasn't a paid job, actually it has actually, proven, to have its own little rewards anyway, though. So, of course, any money I get from selling prints go straight back into buying more prints, and I can sell at conventions and things. So nothing I do is wasted at all. Anything that I would do extra to the commercial work would always have some sort of commercial purpose anyway, though. Otherwise it's an indulgence, and I don't really have until I retire, I won't have that time to indulge myself, and I don't think I'm not intending to retire at all anytime.
I think that's the way things go in the creative industries, isn't it? That you just keep.
Even if the commercial work weren't there, I think there are enough people of my generation who and younger as well who were prepared to commission and buy my work. So as long as unless everybody over the age of 30 is suddenly killed, probably I've got guaranteed work until they are drop dead. I'm not gonna stop. Also, I do get pleasure out of what I do. So there's no nest egg. I haven't got plans to buy a yacht and travel the world. It's not going to happen at all. Though, I'm still paying for my flat. So so yeah, I can't retire just yet. Anyway.
Last two questions, I think. Sefton of Badgers of Bohemia asks, are there other mediums you enjoy working in?
I did lots of sculptural stuff when I was younger, and that would have been an area I think I could have happily gone into, model making, special effects, and actually probably it's a good job I didn't, because special effects, kind of all those craftsmen that did real practical stuff, matte paintings as well would have been another area I would have considered. All those things disappeared with technology, as did of course illustration for a little while. But I found that working in the medium I do, that I can actually achieve virtually everything I want to do quite happily, and I don't feel the need to experiment. I mean, the commercial work especially requires that I can work swiftly, and I can't work in oils or even acrylics. I find very difficult to use and impractical for many reasons. I'm going to stick with the medium that I know for the foreseeable future, and if circumstances change, then yeah, perhaps, but I don't use anything else. So.
I suppose if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Absolutely. As long as they still make the stuff as well, as who's to say that gouache will still be being manufactured in 10 years' time? Maybe it won't be. Even the paper I buy, to work on, who's to say that that's going to be available in 10 years' time? And this is all physical stuff, and if the world is moving in a digital direction, will they hit a point where it's not worth making the stuff anymore? I don't know. I don't think that's the case at all, because I think people still want to do tactile things. But I had one particular stock of paper I used to love working on. It had a brilliant surface, which I really, really liked, and it took paint brilliantly. And for some reason, they just stopped manufacturing it. It was the only surface I ever worked on, just out of the blue. Just it wasn't available anymore. It's not made anymore, and I had to shift to a different type of paper, which was took a while to get used to. But it's the surface I've been using ever since, though. And so when I say circumstances can change, well, that's one of the ways they can. But I'll continue using the paint medium I use at the moment.
This is also from Sefton. Is there someone you would love to paint but haven't had the opportunity to do so yet?
That's an interesting question. Well, actually, no, there probably isn't. I think I've probably managed to paint most of the people I wanted to. One weird thing that does happen, though, is you know, I'm going to be painting people I don't know. That's always part of the job. And one of the weird things that does happen is quite often I'll be working on something, painting, you know, the portraiture as part of a job, and then a couple of years down the line, if not sooner, you'll find yourself meeting that person, and you know, it's, oh, I've painted you. And it's always very odd when you paint somebody, because working in 2 dimensions, working from 2-dimensional material, actually seeing somebody in 3 dimensions, suddenly you kind of realize they don't quite look as you thought they do look, if you like. It's always a peculiar thing. Jeffrey Coombs is somebody I've met a few times, and I've painted him a number of times, and he doesn't really look like any of the pictures I've painted at all. But yeah, so there isn't anybody,
as long as they look like they do on screen, then
yeah, exactly. And also, it's not even a question of being, you know, 100% accurate. You know, you're not trying to be a photograph. What you're trying to do is capture the character they're playing, of course, though, which is not actually the real person. Of course, it involves elements of their physicality, which, you know, they can't change that. But you know, 100% photographic accuracy is not necessary, really. As long as you capture the essence of the character, and, you know, it looks like the person to an extent, then the job's done. But I can't think of anybody offhand that I'm desperate to paint. Again, you know, I don't know what jobs are ahead. You know, it's better to keep it a surprise, really.
Well, I think we'll call it a night. I'm disappearing into a gloomy gloomy background. Thank you very much, Graham, for having a chat, and
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Hopefully we'll be able to have a actual real life physical Sci-Fi Scarborough event next year, where we'll all meet up and have ice creams and fish and chips.
Plugging my new book, of course.
Absolutely, yeah. Hopefully it'll be all ready to go by then.
Well, the public, I think it will have to be locked down around that time, but we'll have a cover and title by December, but it won't be published until available till Halloween 2022. I'll still be plugging it though.
Well, once again, thank you very much, and
that's okay. Well, I hope there's enough material there.
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. Thank you.